Welcome back, folks. The Raptors lose in a thriller to the Miami Heat, losing in overtime. RJ Barrett was electric with 29 points. Let's go to the film room. RJ Barrett must love playing against the Miami Heat because he always loves balling out against them. One thing that helped him tonight was making 4 of his 6 3-point shots, doing it in a variety of ways, but mostly off of the catch. I will say RJ is shooting 35% from 3 this season on over 5 attempts, but if you look at his catch and shoot numbers, he's knocking down about 38% of his catch and shoot shots. That should be scalable when you think about how he'd fit next to Brandon Ingram, because there will be more off-ball opportunities. More off-ball opportunities means more catch and shoot opportunities, and I think that 3-point percentage will actually go up with BI involved moving forward. But this is RJ's bread and butter. I mean, empty side, pick and roll. He gets to his left hand, finishes inside, and then in transition, incredible there, uses his gravity to draw so much attention and get this wide open shot for Grady Dick. Again, in transition here, just pushes it, barrels his way to the basket for the finish. Leaks out here in transition and then finishes through traffic. Little Spain pick and roll for the Raptors, and RJ just uses it, gets Andrew Wiggins on the switch, and then post move hits the floater. I mean, he's rolling at this point. This is fourth quarter. He's making tough shot after tough shot. It was a really great game for him. He had the rhythm, and so they fed him a lot in that fourth quarter. Dribble handoff into a pick and roll, and he just finds Orlando Robinson for the finish, getting the big man involved. This was a wild shot over Davion Mitchell going right. I mean, this is just incredible. Again, he was feeling it in this fourth quarter. Another big bucket in the fourth here over Andrew Wiggins. Just crazy shot to give the Raptors an advantage there. And RJ, man, has just been awesome this season. The Raptors put out that RJ now has surpassed 7,000 points. That is the most in his draft class, in the 2019 draft class. Keeks put up a post kind of talking about some of the other players on there. And admittedly, like RJ, his draft class has been injury riddled, right? You know, John Morant has missed a bunch of games. Zion Williamson has missed a bunch of games. Darius Garland has missed a bunch of games. RJ has the health factor. He just has been consistent and has not been hurt as often as those other guys. And so that helps him be the number one scoring player in his draft class. But either way, it's really impressive. And I think now is a good time to look at the last year with RJ. You know, he got traded in January. We've now got about, 8-9 months of basketball to look at. And we'll be able to do a full review when the season is over to look at everything in full scope. But what an impressive player. And I don't say that lightly, because I think when that trade initially happened, I kind of looked at RJ as like, okay, he was kind of salary to make this deal work to acquire Emanuel Quickley. We'll see how RJ will be able to get acclimated with this team. And honestly, he destroyed all my expectations for what he was. Really bought into his role, really was like a great off-ball player in the second half of last season. Came in this year with a ton of injuries and stepped into a more on-ball role. Improved as a playmaker, was one of the most effective pick-and-roll players in the league for the first 2 or 3 months of the season. And his playmaking is really popped here in Toronto. Now, part of that is the offensive system of the Raptors, but I also think he's just markedly improved as a decision-maker. And offensively, you're noticing that. Excellent in transition, does a great job of barreling his way to the basket. I think the Raptors' offensive sets, especially these handoffs that they have coming out of the empty side, or kind of, pistol actions that they like to run, all of those things really heighten what RJ can run. Like, truthfully, it just heightens the type of player that RJ is. And he's a guy that, like, effective field goal percentage isn't the craziest right now. His effective field goal percentage is 52%, which is not the highest. He was 60% last year in his 32 games with the Raptors, which was really impressive. But that's because of the free throws, unfortunately. He's shooting 65% from the free throw line. And if that were to change, I mean, it would be a massive difference for him as a player. He's excluding the 83% he shot in his 26 games with New York last season, he is about a 70% free throw shooter. So he's not living up to his expectation right now, but he's not necessarily the greatest free throw shooter generally. But he needs to improve on that side. But everything else, you like the numbers. 22 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, getting a steal per game, shooting 48% from the field, 35% from three, like I mentioned. Like, this is a really effective scorer and a guy who kind of understands the type of player that he is. And I think that needs to be commended because of the conversations that were had about RJ just last year. Like, oh, there was that one GM that said he was a toxic asset. And I really don't think that's the case anymore or ever was the case, really, with RJ. I think he is an incredibly effective player. And I'm excited to see how much more he can tap into his potential because he is a younger guy. And we kind of forget this because RJ has been in the league forever, but he's still, technically not in his prime. I think he's done a good job over the last 6 or 7 weeks of being more active defensively, buying in more, and trying to lock in on the defensive end. I know from kind of talking to him and asking him some of these questions in the post game that like that side of the ball is something he's really focused on and trying to buy in on that end and trying to improve as much as possible. But it's not a Rome wasn't built in a day type of thing. It's a process. And I'm very intrigued by what happens with RJ moving forward. Obviously, the Brandon Ingram of it all is an interesting angle to take because I think most people will question, okay, how does this all fit with all three of those guys and Scotty and RJ and IQ and BI? But I think it'll actually work well. I'm of the opinion I think it'll work well. But we'll see. We'll see. You can't see it until you actually see it, if that makes sense. Any sense at all. Sorry, folks. Kind of rusty here with the recaps. You know what I mean? Oh, my God. Been off for a week, and I'm, like, not even used to this. Anyways, look, RJ was great. It's a fun game. This was ugly to start. Really, really ugly game to start this one. But Emanuel Quickley did a good job of keeping the Raptors in this game. RJ Barrett did a good job of keeping the Raptors in this game. Scotty Barnes had an injury scare where he rolled his ankle. Then he came back and he looked okay. Wasn't as effective, and maybe it was the ankle bothering him, but just wasn't effective offensively tonight. Struggled, I thought. And that's part of the growing pains, if you will. But again, maybe it was the injury and the ankle that was bothering. We'll see if we get any sort of update after the game. But let's talk about it quickly. Let's talk about Emanuel Quickley. Let's do it. He was effective. We kind of got like all angles of Emanuel Quickley tonight, the good and the bad. Let's go to the film room. So the good for Emanuel Quickley was that he took 11 threes, and when he is aggressive like that from behind the arc, the equation changes for the Toronto Raptors in terms of the spacing that they have. He's now a threat to be able to get downhill because teams are closing out more often, and on pull-up jumpers, he's able to add a new layer to the Raptors' offense via the pick and roll. It was really effective throughout this game for the most part. He knocked down 5 of 11, and I really love the aggression that he's showing from the three-point line recently. I tweeted this during the game, but he's taken 6 or more threes over his last 5 games now, and that's the type of Emanuel Quickley the Raptors need moving forward. The catch-and-shoot jumpers, the pull-up jumpers, the combination of coming off the screens, off ball, using his gravity as a shooter that way, but also using his gravity on ball to create opportunities for others. That is the type of aggression you need from Quickley every single night. We saw it tonight, so I think that's a huge win for the Raptors developmentally. And we saw a little bit of everything else too. Here he is, pick and roll, and he settles into a floater here. Would like to see him get to his floater bag more often. But I thought Quick really struggled at the basket. And most of these opportunities were in transition where he thought he had an advantage, but was trying to draw fouls on them and ultimately didn't really get anything going. I actually would prefer Quick to pull up in transition instead of trying to drive to the basket, just because it's harder for him to create an advantage barreling downhill. Because he's not strong necessarily, it's not like he's going to get the call and get the respect of the official to get to the free throw line. And so, honestly, a pull-up jumper is probably the most effective thing that he can give you in transition. Why not lean into it? And so, Quick had a pretty good game to start. He was 8 of 19 before the fourth quarter, or before the overtime, and he missed all 3 of his shots in overtime, so he ended up being 8 of 21. Through 4 quarters, I thought he had a pretty good offensive game generally. Overall, I think with Quick, it's like finding and choosing his spots. Again, it's really hard to assess what Quickley has been this year because he hasn't been able to play too often, and so I don't think he's been able to get a rhythm for himself throughout this season as much as an RJ Barrett has, or as even a Scotty Barnes has, to be honest with you. So it's this mismatch of like him trying to get his own rhythm going while also trying to figure out where he is supposed to be offensively, how he's supposed to fit in, with this team offensively. Guys, rusty as hell on these recaps. My goodness. But we'll get back to it. Don't worry, we're good. Rusty, kind of like the Toronto Raptors were to start this game. Man, this was rough. It was a really, really brutal start to the game, but they made it entertaining. And I think the one thing that you can take away from this game, and hopefully moving forward for the Toronto Raptors, is that while they are headed to a developmental finish to this season where they're going to be putting out lineups with 4 rookies and figuring out if Jonathan Mobo can give them minutes at the center spot, and Orlando Robinson getting some opportunity here and there. He obviously started in this game against his former team. While they are going to lean into that aspect of basketball, I think they're going to find a way to make it competitive. And ultimately, everybody knows about their upcoming schedule and how easy it is. There will probably be some gamesmanship there to figure out how they can, game the system a little bit more. We'll see. We'll see how much they actually lean into that aspect, or they don't. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm very intrigued to see how the Raptors approach the final bit of the season when it comes to the gamesmanship aspect. Like, do they end up resting players? Do they end up like holding out players more longer for some of their injuries because of the fact that they want to, prioritize development, give opportunities for some of their other guys, and yes, tank. I think that's part of the equation for this team. Let me see. Did the Pelicans lose today? They did lose. So another team, unfortunately, loses a game. Anyways, that's not that important of a deal compared to what we see developmentally for this Raptors team. The rookies had some good moments too. Not too much to kind of harp on, but they had some pretty decent moments. But I thought the main focuses for tonight were RJ Barrett, his absolute dominance, really, really brilliant game offensively against Miami, and Emanuel Quickley establishing himself as a 3-point threat for this team, which really goes a long way for them offensively. So, folks, we're back, baby. Recaps are back. Tap in, subscribe to the Raptors Republic YouTube channel. Appreciate you guys rocking with us. We've probably got some draft content coming soon, so tap in on that front. Be on the lookout for draft stuff because that's the season. 'Tis the season for draft and development, baby. See you guys later. Bye-bye.